So for people that don't remember or sort of only vaguely remember, can you tell me a little bit about the Humboldt tweet and the ensuing reaction and how that impacted your career?
Yeah, yeah. So the news, I believe, is a Friday in April 2018 that this accident had happened and 15 members of the Humboldt Broncos were killed. It would become 16 the week later. And I received that information like everyone else. Obviously, I remember watching the press conference on Saturday because I had a rare day without my kids for the first time. So it was like very memorable that I was able to watch this press conference. And then so it's following the news the whole time, right? And I did my master's at the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon, and I'm very interested in questions of space and how Canada is like we accept traffic accidents as if they're
Yeah.
just like normal, right? It's like, yeah, it's cost of living in this country is a traffic accident, right? But we see this like really unthinkable level of carnage in a situation with on a bus where people all know each other. So that also like changes the narrative on like a Greyhound bus where you can have people that don't necessarily know each other. And so the Sunday night, I write this tweet after two conversations I was having on Twitter, one about traffic accidents and the mundanity of that in Canada, and then also about how at that point 15 people was the same number of women and their family, so a couple of children and a brother, who were murdered by people who had been stalking them or who had been former intimate partners with them. And at that point, the fundraiser had already hit $4 million for the Humboldt Broncos, and I said something like, it's a lot of money, and I wish that we could see these kinds of deaths remembered in equal measure. But of course, in Canada, you know, inequality follows us in death just as it follows us in life. And yeah, and it exploded, and that's kind of where the story. I can end that story there because I could talk about what it's like to live
Mm.
through something like that.
Yeah,
But
just for the I've got it here just for the benefit of the audience. I'm trying to not get cynical about what is totally a devastating tragedy, but the maleness, the youthfulness, and the whiteness of the victims are, of course, playing a significant role. This is the tweet that the
right.
right wing media really jumped on. After you tweeted it, did you have any expectation of this kind of thing? Like it was part of
No.
a thread. It didn't seem like a big grand statement. So
No. And at the time, I mean, my Twitter following, I think, was only 2,500, which was a lot for me. I was like, okay. And there's some engagement. I think maybe 4 or 5 people responded. But no, it was purposely like kicked into overdrive. There was signs that I had people saying, "Oh, you're going to be sorry for that." And I was like, "Okay." But people who I knew were connected to the Conservative Party, and then all of a sudden, you had like a column from Adrian Batra, who's the editor in chief of the Toronto Sun, denouncing me for this horrific tweet that came out 2 days later. And then it snowballed. Then it was like, so Sunday night to Tuesday is what it took for it to go viral. It did
hmm,
not go viral instantly, and did not go viral on its own merits, because of course what I was saying is something that everybody, like so many people say this, right? People are in touch with me privately saying, I can't believe that this happened, like what is going on. And so that week, I remember meeting up with a journalist for lunch just because he was in town covering the Bissonnette trial, the murder of the shooting at the mosque. It was his sentencing hearing, and I said to him, it's wild that I'm the most hated person today, while you're here writing about someone that literally killed 6 people in a mosque. Like, isn't that just so ironic? And then of course 10 days later, there was the van attack in Toronto that was a targeted attack. We know it was an incel attack, and killed 10 people, if I'm not wrong, injured 6 people seriously. And of course they didn't raise the same amount of money. I mean, it's just, and then people are like,
hmm.
oh no, you're right. But by then I was like, my career was toast, my social media was toast. And yeah, I was made into an example of. And it was also like, I think it's important to note that the far right, and I'm gonna call the Toronto Sun in this situation far right, um and the right, I guess, maybe generally, the Ontario Prouds, the Canada Prouds of the world, they've been trying to get me on something
Hmm.
for a long time. And so there were these flashpoints for the last 2 years before that, where they really tried to like make an issue out of a tweet that I wrote. And on that one, they were successful.
And what was the ensuing reaction? Like you received a torrent of various messages and things, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, like Jason Kenney got involved, and he said something on his Facebook page that ended up like netting 2,000 like reactions, like not react, like comments
Wow.
plus
Yeah.
reactions. Sarah Palin made a comment about it. It got picked up by my local newspaper, and so I was in the local newspaper, which was kind of a trip. And like in French, and they're just like covering it like, we're not sure what the problem here is, but Jason Kenney is attacking a journalist from Quebec City. It's like, yeah, that's weird. And yeah, I had 30 million Twitter impressions for 5 days. So effectively my phone was useless. I
Hmm.
couldn't do anything with my phone. It was just too like nonstop. And hundreds of violent threats, thousands and thousands and thousands of messages, phone calls, calls to anybody that's employed me. Friends that worked at the Globe and Mail were saying that they were getting calls all day because I'd recently published in the Globe and Mail. So that was kind of
Mm.
funny. But of course, that led to why they wouldn't publish me again. And then denounced by Maclean's and just kind of hung out to dry, right? Like
Mm.
there wasn't very many mainstream voices defending me, which I felt very annoyed by, to say the least. And then what was the most confusing was that, this was all very, in my mind, it was very clearly orchestrated. And I passed some information to some people. There's a nice article in Briar Patch and the Huffington Post that kind of deconstructed what was obvious. Rabble did something as well, but no one ever followed up on what happened there. Like there was no, there, like I was never interviewed about what happened after. I was asked for interviews in the aftermath, which I said, I do not want to take away the focus from the families. And so I said, no, I refused all interviews for the 2 weeks that followed. But after that, I thought it was so weird because it was like, this was like a practice run to first of all, to try and get me to self-harm. That was very obvious.
Mm.
And to silence a critical journalist. And there was no interest from the mainstream journalism establishment to have this conversation. I got private messages from some people. The Canadian Federation for Free or the Canadian Journalists for Free Expression, CJFE, which doesn't exist anymore, of which I was a member, they didn't say anything. Like it was wild. It was very wild, and it felt like it was because it was me, or not
Mm.
me personally, but because it was someone who's left wing and critical and who mainstream media would rather like see go away anyway. They were just like, oh yeah, nothing happened. Nothing happened. I was brought into the CBC did ask me on to a show on the Sunday morning show, which used to be Wendy Mesley's show. And it was a joke. I mean, they flew me in for a 3-minute clip because Bill Morneau ended up saying yes to an interview, and they're like, sorry, we had to cut the segment.
Mm.
And then the other guest had to record his thing 3 times because Mesley thought he was being too political in his comments.
Hmm.
It was just like, it felt very surreal. And then it just disappeared from consciousness, not about its impact on me personally, but what does this mean in general for left-wing critical journalism,
Right.
or anybody that's outside the mainstream? Just no self-reflection on that, and no using this as an example for what is to come. And of course, what has come, well, we've seen. Now it's even worse. Now it's
Yeah.
normal and way worse.
So when you face that kind of like torrent of right wing criticism, like the true cancel culture, but also like you say, the people that are colleagues that don't stand up for you, and you're sort of like there alone holding the line. I mean, how do you process that personally? Was there a part of you that thought like, I need to apologize, I need to change course? Like how do you approach that?
Yeah. So they picked like the right person to do this to, because I was just like, bring it. Like, you know, there would be threats like, I can see, I'm across from your driveway right now and I can see you. And it's like, I don't have a driveway. Like, I'm not, you're not going to scare me. Like, what, you're going to kill me over that? Okay, fine. Like, sure. My kids will be mad, but whatever. Right. But yeah, it is very, I think that the one emotion that I do keep coming back to, and I have to be very careful to not like hold on to it too long. And I don't get obsessive by it. Like, it's not something I have to actively push away, but it's very hard to not feel like totally bitter.
Hmm.
Very, very hard. And when you stare at that bitterness, it's like staring at the sun, right? And you're like, no, 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 no. I have to just forget how spineless and how cowardly and how not journalistic, and how there's no solidarity within this industry. And I'm up against that all the time. I'm up against it all the time. And so I have to just remind myself that if it wasn't like this, I wouldn't probably have to do the journalism that I do.
Hmm.
And so that would be cool. And then I could do something else. Then maybe I could actually be the one that gets to write about my kids or donuts or something like, well, light and fun. But that's not the world we live in. And so I try to transform that bitterness into just being like constantly not surprised.
Right.
Constantly not surprised, never really disappointed. Disappointed sometimes, but really not really. I've pitched to the Globe, I think maybe 7 or 8 times since then. And every time it has to go to the editorial board for some reason. And every time they're like, no. And so it's not crushing. It's just like, add that to the list and I'll
Mm.
go somewhere else and someone else is going to take it. And, and it's, I mean, it's all intended to grind me into the ground. And as I say, they picked the wrong person for that because I just
Yeah.
can't be. Not with that. I can be grounded to the ground with other stuff.